Hello, everyone. It's been a long time. Let's remove the spotlight. And here we are. A number of people have let me know that they're unable to be on Zoom today. And also, I have a feeling some people are just out of practice. I'm hoping we'll get one or two more, and then I can say Kaddish also towards the end. Thank you to all of you who sent condolences on the death of my mother. Appreciate it. We're in Palm Springs now. We're driving to LA to bring our daughter to LAX tomorrow morning. And we'll be back here again for Shabbat. Aside from this class, restarting, we have another class that is beginning tomorrow in person for those of you who are in Palm Springs. We'll begin at St. Paul, another one of our mini courses, this time on the book of Micah, together with Reverend Dan Klein. I had hoped that we would finish what we're doing today before we took the break, but things came up. There was a court case. I needed to be at a court hearing. And the reason was because we're finishing this is the final bit of what's called the Wisdom of Solomon, which is ironic because much of the book is called the Wisdom of Solomon. But this particular section that we've done, which are doublets, if you remember, these kind of two-lined bits of wisdom, sometimes with a connection between themselves, many times without, most of the time without, perhaps. We're going to finish that up today, even though it lands in the middle of the chapter. And then we're starting something next week, which has a direct parallel to ancient Egyptian wisdom literature. And so we'll be, instead of looking so much at how the words of Mishle were interpreted in later generations, in the rabbinic writings and medieval Jewish tradition, we'll be looking a little bit at comparing how the words of Mishle perhaps reinterpret things that they found in more ancient or in the wisdom literature of their time. And there'll be more on that next week, of course. But for now, we begin with, oh, good. So I think we will have a minyan. If anyone has to leave beforehand, let me know and we'll take a break. We have 3 here, and there's 7 of you as of now, and then we can say Kaddish. So if you've got to go, let me know, and we'll take a break to say Kaddish. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, welcome, Diane.
Thanks. Hi.
Have you been with us before?
Not on the study. I was there for
Oh, yes, of course. You were with us in prayer. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. It's good to see you again. I'm glad you're joining us for the study. While you're joining in the middle of a book, I could say in some ways you haven't really missed anything. I mean, you have missed anything, but there's no plot to follow. There's some obviously different characteristics of the book of Proverbs that we've noticed that we mentioned before. But this is the kind of class where every time you come is almost isolated. Next week it might be a little bit different because, as I just mentioned beforehand, we'll be comparing the biblical writings to earlier Egyptian wisdom literature. So if I could ask Dan if you would read the number 1 to 4, the first section for us. The way I split it up today really was just three verses at a time, 3 or 4 verses at a time, because I didn't see any inner breakdown. I couldn't find any breakdown, so I just broke them down in bite-sized pieces. Go ahead, Dan.
Repute is preferable to great wealth. Grace is better than silver and gold. The rich and poor meet, God made them both. One who is shrewd sought trouble and took cover. The simple kept going and paid the penalty. The effect of humility is fear of God. The effect of humility is fear of God, wealth, honor, and life.
Okay. Initial reactions from anybody?
I'm not sure if I understand the meaning. The effect of humility is fear of God, fear of wealth. I'm not sure if I understand that or
Oh,
how
okay. So we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, that's a simple.
syntax of the.
Yeah, I think basically that when you have humility, when you realize that you as a human being are not the center of the universe, then you have this fear. Fear is not always the best translator. You are in awe of God, Yirat Adonai, and with that comes not fear of wealth, but with that will come wealth and honor and life. And that's very in step with so many things that we've seen in this book until now. This side by side, you are in many ways, but in a second, I'll take a step back. Many ways you are the master, the mistress of your own fate, because how you act dictates what's going to happen to you in this world. But of course, that's not the full picture, as we're going to see in just a moment in the second verse. But in this case, though, this idea, the connection between humility, person who contributes to society, modesty, and God is a tricky one because so many people, including many here perhaps, don't think of God in those terms. We think of humanity and we think of maybe the universe, the creation, but one of the sales points from a humanistic point of view in a humanistic theology, that is where human beings are in the center of what we talk about between the relationship between human beings and God, as opposed to God being overbearing in the center, is that this is the usefulness. I hate to say the word, but the usefulness of having a relationship with God, whether it's just literary or whether it's actually in person, is that it allows you to understand how really unimportant you are in the scheme of things, or what you want. You, of course, are important because you're part of the greater society you build. Everybody has a contribution, but it's not about us, not about you, it's not about me. It's about something greater. And the something greater could be society, something greater could be a country, something greater could be the humanity, uh, the environment. But once there's something greater, and especially if it's beyond what we can see and feel and we can use for our own benefit, then that has the ability, according to this verse, and I think according to our common sense by now, has the ability um, to raise children in perhaps a more with more consideration, more sensitivity. We're going to get to the raising children in a little bit today. So what I'm trying to say is something similar to, I think I've told the story before, that when I was the first pulpit I had before I was a rabbi, I was in rabbinical school, but I was serving as an educational director in Jerusalem. And we opened up a preschool so that we would attract younger families, and indeed we did. But these younger families were self-defined secular Israelis, chilonim. And even though when we presented the preschool, we said there would be prayer in the morning, and I led a lot of the prayer myself with these little kids. And there would be blessings. There would be Kabbalat Shabbat. Uh, some of the parents were uncomfortable with how much their kids were coming home saying blessings. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. And my response to them was, in the parents' meeting, was, first of all, this is how we marketed. We are a liberal religious institution. But second of all, this is just another way of teaching our children to say thank you, to be mindful and to be grateful, say thank you, and getting them out of themselves a little bit. If they have the practice of saying something before they eat something or smell something, something in praise, something positive, then it's less altruistic from a theological point of view, but it's very instrumental. It's very useful. At least, and that's what I'm thinking about here as well. Right? If you are humble, then things fall into place because it's not about you. Was somebody going to say something? Sorry.
Before we go on, questions. You boldened the third and fourth line.
Right. Of course, we'll get to that in a moment. Yeah. Yeah. Charles, did you want to say something?
Well, I sometimes get hung up on words and I, maybe needlessly, but I got hung up on the word one who is shrewd. And I wonder what that definition would be in Hebrew, because shrewd to me implies something maybe sinister or scheming. And but the sense of the word, the sense of the statement is if one is wise, they'd see trouble and take cover.
Yeah, so
Sorry to be hung up on things like
no,
that.
no, you're hung up on a good word. This is something I think it's unique to the book of Proverbs. Don't remember exactly, but usually when we see the word arum, which is translated here as shrewd, um, for instance, the serpent is arum in the story of Genesis from this coming week's Torah portion. The orma and arum are usually thought of in negative or yeah in negative sense, especially in modern Hebrew certainly as well. But the book of Proverbs uses it. I didn't count how many times, but I'm feeling it uses it just as much or more in the positive sense. In other words, it's a neutral term here. Shrewd meaning clever, smart, intelligent. So it would be interesting to see how other English translations translate. This is the Jewish Publication Society, the latest edition. But that we have seen that in Proverbs, 4 or 5 times beforehand, if I remember correctly, where this word arum is used not only in a neutral sense, but even in a positive sense. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Can
It,
you?
yes.
Oh, but I always get so confused by that word and the word for naked in Hebrew. Arum. Is there any connection between them?
It's a play on words in Genesis in that first story, but I would have to look and see. I would have to look and see. So I don't have the answer to that. Yeah. But a good observation. It's certainly a play on words in that story that we're going to read, or some of us will read this week, this Shabbat.
There's a room.
Yeah.
It's, I always
So,
wonder the connection.
so you know what? Let's take a minute here for what we would call in university הדרכה ביבליוגרפית. איך נגיד, סשה? הדרכה bibliographic guidance. It's like we had a class in the first semester, first year in Bible department. We had a class in which somebody actually worked with us on all the reference books, how to look things up in dictionaries and concordances, what were the different commentaries, the series of commentaries. It gets so let's do a little thing here and so I'm going to go to the source that if Diane, if you don't know it yet, it is good to know the um,
Oh, Sepharia. Yes, I know it well.
so when we look in Sepharia and we see the words here, and then we go we could look at translations, but instead what I want to do right now is you go to more reference. And the classic dictionary of biblical Hebrew is BDB, Briggs Driver Brown or Brown Driver Briggs, don't remember which. We click on that and we'll see Arum, crafty, shrewd, sensible. Crafty as in this Genesis story. And here in Proverbs in good sense, in a positive sense. So there's a few sections, a prudent man. So there's quite a few here, and they're all in Proverbs. And so there's no relationship here. So if how do I get to BDB? Let's see here. Open. You'll see that there are too many things on my screen here. So the
Do
word
you need
arom,
me to share something?
no, it's all right. Arom here has is be shrewd, crafty. That's what we saw. But this is part of Arom 2, the second Ayin Resh Mem root. And he compares it to the Arabic stripped flesh from the bones, something very plain. An arima is a heap. That comes from Aram 1. That's to be heaped up. And why might I say Aram? Because are we? Is it because it's with an olive? Why I'm not thinking straight right now. It's because, yeah. So
Now, the one for naked is with an I too.
I think so, but I'm not sure why we're not finding it here. Yeah, sorry. So I actually shouldn't have gone into this, but that's why I would start. I would start by doing this, looking there, and yeah, I should have just left it with don't know. So let's go back to this. Okay. So Charles, you put something, what are those letters?
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Nothing we need to know. Okay. All right. Yeah, I owe you the answer for that for next time.
No, that's fine. I just sometimes get hung up on things like that, but shrewd just had a different meaning to me.
Okay. So if you were to do what I just did now, there's a section you can click on looking at other translations and see what else others have done. But one of the words there was crafty. Crafty perhaps is a little bit less. No, it's also kind of sinister. Okay. The words that I emboldened, I try to do for each section here, connect it with something from post-biblical interpretation. So this one, it's also interesting in itself. Ashir varash nifgashu, right? The rich and the poor, they meet. They meet or they met. And the comment is, Oseh kulam Adonai. God made them both. So what could be the pod, before we get to the rabbinic understanding of this, what could be, what are the situations in which poor and rich meet?
Right.
Well, think of ourselves.
All the time.
No, what, I mean, I don't know if any of us are poor. I don't know if any of us are rich per se, are super wealthy, but where do rich and poor meet? And
Everywhere.
where somebody would say, and they're both created by God. Okay, so
All over the place, walking down the street.
so walking down the street. Okay, so walking down the street, there's really not that much interaction, right? So you could say that you could see somebody dressed perfectly in expensive clothes and somebody a beggar, somebody homeless, and you could look at them both, and you could say to your child, or you could say to yourself, or to your students, or to your teacher, you know what? Both of those, God created both of those, and as much as we as human beings tend to judge them differently, we need to remember they're both creations of God. So that's one possibility. Another possibility would be, I just think my initial reaction was in the synagogue, right? You get a synagogue where you have people of different financial financial status. And is it only the wealthy one who gets called to the Torah and given honors? Is it only the wealthy one who can be the gabbai and aside? And the truth is, in many synagogues, it's kind of an equalizing factor. In many synagogues, the one who is very, very pious, or the one who is there all the time, has a little bit more power, a little bit more respect than perhaps somebody only comes on the high holidays, even though they're wealthier. So I thought of synagogue because this is a theological thing, because God is involved in here. I think of a protest, right? There's a protest, the Occupy movement. it kind of pitted, at least theoretically, it pitted low-income people against high-income people. They didn't necessarily meet there in the place, but the situation brought them together. And then you have, for instance, the cry, I think, of people who are disadvantaged saying, we were all created by God. You're not better than me because you have more money.
My first thought was a hospital.
Sasha's first impression is the hospital. I
Yeah,
don't know if you know,
yeah, I thought that too.
yeah, everybody's lying with an infusion or with a thing or whatever. Yeah, everybody needs the doctor's help and the nurse's help and the technician's help. Everybody has to have the bedpan, right? Even if you're rich, you still got to have a bedpan at some point. Yeah. So to me, that's the beauty of this particular section. I was attracted to this because it allows itself to be understood in many ways, and it's an item. It's a centerpiece, an object to teach with. I mean, Michelet is about teaching. It's about learning and teaching. Some of it is projected towards ourselves. Much of it, as you've seen, is projected towards parents and teachers. And this one just seems to be, it stood out. And we'll look, so is it, before we go down to Shmot Rabbah, is there anything else that somebody wanted to pick out from the simple meaning of the text? Okay, Dan, go ahead and read. Midrash Shmot Rabbah is has two sections to it. The first section until 11, chapter or section 11, is what we call an exegetical midrash, play by play. And that way it's similar to Genesis Rabbah, Breshit Rabbah. And my teacher and friend, Professor Avigdor Shenan, edited and published that section of the book independently many years ago. I don't remember if it was the 90s or so, or the aughts. I was able to visit him a few weeks ago in Jerusalem after not seeing him for a long time. And he's now working on the second section, which includes this. When we it filled me with such joy to sit down and to see him work on those. It reminded me of those wonderful days when I was his research assistant, and and so I said, oh, so isn't it from the Tanhuma family, like Midrash Tanhuma we've spoken about over the years? He says, no, that's what they say. He says, I don't know who came up with that, but that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing something, it's on its own. I said, so from what time is it? What time period? He says, David, it's anywhere from what did he say? It's anywhere from when it was first printed, I don't know, whenever it was, 13th century, down to, you know, third, fourth century. He says, I don't know. I don't have enough information yet. Nothing that sticks out. He's got, I've got a lot of work to do. So this is from that section, and this is homiletical. In other words, the text of the Midrash has big chunks that seem to be taken out of a homily, a sermon, as opposed to a play-by-play kind of. So go ahead, Dan.
Happy is anyone whose hand is extended to the poor. See what is written. Wealthy and poor meet, the Lord is maker of them all. And likewise, the poor and the deceitful man meet. The Lord enlightens the eyes of both of them, from later in Proverbs. The poor man acquired life in this world, and the wealthy man acquired life in the world to come. But the poor man who extends his hand.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about there.
But the homeowner does not want to give to him.
Yeah, so who extends his hand and / but the homeowner doesn't want to give it to him because he's better.
The Lord is the maker of them all. The one who made this one wealthy is destined to make him poor, and the one who made this one poor is destined to make him wealthy. There is no attribute harsher than poverty, as anyone who has suffered in poverty. It is as though all the suffering in the world adheres to him, and as though all the curses in the book of Deuteronomy have come upon him. Our rabbi said, had all forms of suffering gathered on one side and poverty on the other side, poverty would tip the scales against all of them.
So two very different sections to what you just read, Dan. The first one has to do with theodicy, justifying us justifying God when we think God is not judging the world properly, this unfairness kind of a thing. And in that you have two variables or two oscillating factors. One is the fact that fortunes can change. The poor man can become rich, the rich man can become poor. The other one is what happens after death. They're both there. They're like, they're both there to keep the whole structure in balance. Oh, it's unjust what's happened right now. Don't worry. After you die, things will be better for you. Or, it's unjust right now. Just see what happens next year. 2 years from now, everything might be turned upside down. So it's a very, yeah, it's, I don't know okay, lost my thought on that one. In general, I'm having a little bit trouble concentrating. I hope you'll understand. For those that asked about Shiva, when there's a funeral, I think many of you know when there's a funeral during the Chag itself, then you're not supposed to start Shiva until after. There's debate whether Simchat Torah counts for the first one. Today is Simchat Torah in the diaspora that we don't keep, or tomorrow is the first day. One way or another, I we kind of had a little bit of a shiva, which we were not shiva, after the funeral on Thursday, and so I haven't really sat, and I'm busy with other stuff. So my focus is less than I would like it to be usually. So that's my apology. Back to this thing. Let's just go to the second paragraph for a second. Um, this idea that poverty is worse than pain, suffering, physical suffering, or emotional suffering. And to me, what this is saying is that everything comes along with poverty. We look at our world now. So lack of health care, lack of moral support, lack of social standing. Like so many things come around poverty, I think, or perhaps this person who's giving this sermon experienced poverty, severe poverty himself, and for him, this was blinding to everything else in life. I don't know, what do you folks think?
Um,
Go ahead.
feeling of immediate reaction, but if I may go back to the previous paragraph,
Sure.
poor man acquired life in this world, no wealthy man acquired life in the world to come. Could that be taken as the person who concentrates on this world is a poor person, and the real world is in the world to come, rather than, because as read originally, it's as if um, uh, I've lost my thread here. I'm getting confused as to what's consequence and what's cause.
It's not clear here, and I would have to go back, when I have more time, I look at the Hebrew and see what this is a translation that was offered in Sefaria, and I don't know who did it. I've mentioned before that sometimes the translations there are community translations. People and who knows who's giving it. They're lovely people, I'm sure, with great intentions, but don't know how well they're, what kind of academic skills they have. So what I did was to bunch it all together to say that it's a whole thing of of those two things. One about what might happen in the future in this world. The other one is what happens in the world to come. And both of those are uh, kind of uh, shaston bitachon, pressure. Anyway, they're a way out. What's that? No, pressure valve kind of. I don't know. So I'm as confused as you are.
That's reassuring.
Okay. Anything else on this section? Okay, Harold, do you want to read 5 to 8?
Thorns and snares are in the path of the crooked. Those who value their life will keep far from them. Train children in the way they each ought to go. They will not swerve from it even in old age. A rich person rules the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the man who lends. One who sows injustice shall reap misfortune. The rod of wrath shall fail.
Okay, comments, initial comments?
The one thought that I had about the last line, the rod of wrath shall fail, what I picture is somebody who is like in the previous line, one who sows injustice, a rich person rules the poor, one who sows injustice, etc., that they have the rod of wrath, like a rich person rules the poor, a wealthy person who has power over those less powerful, when they get angry with them, when they have a rod of wrath, so to speak, that will ultimately fail. That's what I think may be.
Yeah, that's what Sadia Gaon, that's his interpretation on this particular verse here. So those things, and as we see that in the world, that it works this way, similar to the conversation we were having just a moment ago, but ultimately that will fail. Yeah, and it could be that that the word rod was used because beforehand there's somebody who sows, you sow with a rod, apparently you yeah. Maybe I remember the days we sowed with when we were farmers, we sowed with broomsticks because we were sand farming. So one person, we had a broomstick, whatever the measurement was, with a piece of wood nailed here. So one person would go forward and do the hole wherever the drip system was. We had the drip system, do the hole, and the next person would come and put 2 seeds of squash in it or whatever we were doing. So we were literally sowing with rods. Okay. The verse that's outlined, that's bold in here, is one of those more famous verses in the book of Mishlei. As I did one session with the Orange County group that was devoted to modern Hebrew, classical and modern Hebrew, the influence of Proverbs on it. And this would be one of those phrases that's really taken in Jewish literature and even in modern Hebrew as well. But it's taken in possibly a different way here. Chanoch lenar al pi darko. Train children in the way they each ought to go. That is one translation, one possibility. Another possibility is, and this is how it is used often in modern Hebrew, train a young person in a way which is most appropriate for them, which works best for them. And that seems to be different than they each ought to go. Ought to seems to me to be compelling to a certain way. In other words, children at age 14 should do this, and we're going to see there's something about age in a second in rabbinic literature. At age 15, this, 16, this. This is a more progressive attitude in education. Let's take each child as they are and create a learning situation for them, which is best suitable for them as individuals. Those are 2 different educational ideologies, philosophies. And so this verse is used in modern Hebrew, at least in the circles that I traveled in. It's used in the second way, in the more progressive way. But there is a book that I bought as soon as we had children. With Gabi must have been, yeah, Gabi was still a baby. I worked in a bookstore of sacred books in Mea Shearim, and there was a book that we actually, my boss had a small publishing company as well, and we published that book, Chanoch Lenar al Pi Darko. It was a thin volume, and I think I know where it is even. And it's advice to parents in the Haredi world, advice to parents how to raise their children. What are the things that you do to raise your children? And we'll see some similar advice from Elijah of Vilna in a second. But before we get to that, and then if you take the second part of it, and whatever it is, if you say the first way, that if you teach them the way they should be taught, with the way ought to be taught, then when they're older, they will go according to the way. It's all in the education. It's all in the training. The other way, the more progressive way, if you are attentive to the needs of each and every individual student, then you're giving them the tools, the instruments to move forward on their own as well. Anything else before there's something in 5 to 8. Sinim, pachim. Sinim we now know and is pretty clear are thorns, but in medieval rabbinic commentaries understood this from tsina, cold. So for them it was the cold and the snares, the cold and the traps are in the path of the crooked. There's cold being something negative in this world, as opposed to thorns. Anything else before we get to the rabbinic literature? Okay, Harold, from Babylonian Talmud, Kiddushin. This is a section that deals with when you should arrange. Kiddushin deals with marriage, and this is a section which talks about arranging your child's marriage. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, just a second. What do you call just a warning here, a trigger warning? This is extremely, of course, old-fashioned. It's talking about men marrying women, certain ages, it being done for themselves. I think it's up to us then to look at this situation and see, so what do we get out of this yeah, go ahead. Post-gender binary world. Go ahead.
Okay. Rav Huna says, if one is 20 years old and has not yet married a woman, all of his days will be in a state of sin concerning sexual matters. Really? Will he be in a state of sin all of his days? Rather, say that this means the following. All of his days will be in a state of thoughts of sin. Rava said, and similarly, the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, until one reaches the age of 20 years, the praised Holy One sits and waits for a man, saying, when will he marry a woman? Once he reaches the age of 20 and has not married, he says, let his bones swell. Rav Chisda said, the fact that I am superior to my colleagues is because I married at the age of 16. If I would have married at the age of 14, I would say to the Satan, an arrow in your eye. Rava said to Rabbi Natan Bar Ami, while your hand is still on your son's neck, that is, while you still have authority, what is the appropriate age? From 16 until 22, and some say from 18 until 24.
Perhaps a tricky passage in our particular community with many men who are not married to women, and almost nobody who was married at age 16. And so you see his kind of lack of modesty here, perhaps, but just to go through the different steps here, right? The first is not earlier, it's from the Talmud itself, Amoraic. Opa.
Can I ask something? What's the connection between that and the passage from Mishlei?
Oh, you know what? I think I trimmed it down and I took out the proof text. A good question, but the proof text has to do with Chanoch Lenar al pi darko, that you should raise a child according to the way they should be. And part of giving them guidance is getting them married at the right time.
Okay.
So you'll see, Diane, I have this thing about getting everything on two sides of one paper.
Yeah,
And so that's why
I
there's
do
no
that too.
spaces. I start out with spaces and margins with each thing, but when I want to get something on, and sometimes I trim the sources themselves because it goes on about the same kind of a thing. And what I did here is I trimmed the actual reference to the proof text. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. So this has to do with properly raising children and deciding for them when they should get married. Um, this idea of not being married means, of course, that you can't have sexual contact. And knowing men as they did, that it's on people's minds, on young men's minds already from the age of 16 and perhaps age of 14. So that one strange passage there where he says, and if I am who I am, I am the man I am today because I was married at 16. That's how pious I am. That's how successful I am from an ethical, moral point of view. And had I got married at 14, I would have said to the Satan, you know what? An arrow in your eye. In other words, like, you know, screw you. Whatever the term would be, like, you know, you're not going to get me, Satan. Right? If 14, it would have been even better. It would have been even better. Um, let's see. So now we see the bottom line is from 16 until 22. Some say 1824, and then it goes on and say that this is like the Tanaim, the early rabbis before the time of the Talmud, and then it gives the proof text. Okay, so that has to do with age of marriage. Now comes something kind of interesting from the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Eliyahu mi Vilna, 18th century, kind of thought of as one of the main leaders against the Hasidic movement. There were a number of mitnagdim, who were opposed to everything that was happening in the Hasidic world. The difference between some of we sometimes think, I was raised to think that mitnagdim also did not have a relationship with Kabbalah. It turns out they did, as did the Vilna Gaon. But here he gives some this is an ethical will that he writes. We have the copy of his ethical will that he writes to his children and grandchildren before he dies, to be given to them, I think, upon his death. Yeah. So if you could read this as well, Harold.
Yeah. Among my books is a copy of Mishle with Yiddish translation. For the sake of Hashem, have them read it daily. It is better than any Musar book. They should also read Koheles a lot because it points out the vanity of this world, and other books as well.
Okay, so hold on. Let's take a break. So you can see the translation here is done by somebody who's Orthodox, who uses the Ashkenazic pronunciation. And also the Musar movement, some of you have seen that online. Some of you have done courses. Musar literally means, and Musar is a light word, a key word of sorts in the book of Proverbs. And the Musar literature is spread over hundreds of centuries. But in the 19th century, there was this kind of movement called the Musar movement, that people should read and learn this literature, not in the Hasidic world. Hasidim had Hasidic literature. Mitnagdim had this kind of literature, and it's character development literature. One of the most famous is Mesilat Yesharim, Chaim David Litzato. Another one is Orchot Tzadikim, which is an anonymous author. Anyway, so he says reading, and why in Yiddish translation? Because the Hebrew can be challenging, and perhaps he's also maybe he's referring to the women here as well, who would not be assumed to understand the biblical text. We're at the bottom line, but God forbid.
But God forbid that reading should be the objective. Reading Musar alone does not necessarily move one to act. Going out into the world without a good understanding of it defeats the whole purpose. It is like one sows without having plowed. The wind and birds will carry the seeds away because they aren't closed off and protected. So is he who merely reads Musar, like him who plants without a fence. Pigs will eat and trample on everything. Some plant on stone. This is comparable to a heart of stone which cannot be penetrated unless it is struck until it breaks open. That's why I wrote you to hit to hit our children if they don't obey you. Train a lad in the way he ought to go. This is an important principle of education.
So Diane, now you see that we believe in equal opportunity for texts that we like and texts that we don't like. Um, this is the point where there's always somebody. I could see Eileen's head moving back and forth. We have one member who's not here who would often say, "I have a problem with this text." Well, of course we do. Um, and uh, and so yeah, but this is from that world, not justifying it, but wanting to look at it, try to understand and explain it. That in the Vilna Gaon's world, education was discipline, had a lot to do, and it was very strict discipline as well. And so I'm guessing the Vilna Gaon would not agree with our understanding, the progressive understanding that you should, oh, maybe not, but treat each child according to their own abilities. Let's think about how many kids who are on the spectrum, how many kids who have
Mhm.
sorts of conditions have been smacked and beaten because they were deemed to be misbehaving. Um, okay. Any other comments on this section? Okay, Diane, would you like to read 9 to 12?
One who is generous is blessed while giving bread to the poor. Expel the scoffer, and contention departs. Quarrel and contumely cease. What's contumely? Quarrel and contumely cease. A pure-hearted comrade, his speech is gracious. He has the king for his companion.
Last two lines?
Oh, the eyes of God watch the person who is wise. God subverts the words of the treacherous.
Yeah. So I don't know what contumely means either. I don't know if any of you do, but the Hebrew is vayishbot din v'kalon. The things that will cease will be quarrel, din, and embarrassment.
Mm.
That's how I would translate. Anyone else? Nothing? Okay. So by this time, the things that we've seen, many of them seem so obvious and repetitive. But what comes up in this last line is something which seems to be a little bit difficult to understand. Einei Adonai, the eyes of God. It says in Hebrew, Nathru dat. Nathru is from the word in linsor is to guard over, like nitzor or to stop. Nitzor l'shoncha meira. Watch your tongue from speaking evil. That's the words that are said to a human being. Here, God's eyes, they stop or watch over, preserve maybe, um, something which is wise, dot, which is wisdom. What the translator adds here, and as do many commentators, medieval commentators, is that it doesn't make sense that God's eyes watch over the wisdom itself. God watches over the people who have that wisdom, guards them, watches over them. Yeah, and the opposite is God will subvert those words of the people who are treacherous. So that kind of makes sense. What caught my eye here, though, is this idea that God's eyes watching. God's eyes, in other words, not in a negative sense. We think in terms of, God will see you. I don't know. What would be a biblical verse? Um, Again, if we go to this week's Torah portion, God knows what Adam and Eve have done. God's watching, the watching God. watching angels. And here it's the watching which preserves. Yeah, so I guess it's like watch over us, and in the way that sometimes we translate Yivarech Adonai v'yishmerecha, may God bless you, watch over you, bless you and watch over you. Okay, so the power of watching, and again thinking, okay, that's God, but what does it mean for us? When we watch, we pay attention as opposed to burying our heads in the sand. We watch over something to preserve it. We watch over wisdom and knowledge by making sure they're accessible, by teaching, by not burning books or outlawing books. So let's see what Ralbag has to say. I don't know, maybe once I brought Ralbag into the conversation. 13th, 14th century Provence. Why don't you go? There's a typo here. It should be the eyes of God. If you could read this as well, Diane.
The eyes of go behold.
Of God. It should be God.
God. Oh, I see. The eyes of God. Okay, God. The eyes of God, behold, God's eyes and providence guard the minds of the sages to keep their thoughts clear, and their wisdom or advice disproves the words of the traitors in order to overthrow them from their power.
So what I like about Ralbag's commentary is it's not God doing both things. God will watch over the wise people, and they in turn will fact check. That's the first thing that came to my mind. This is enabling the wise people to fact check and to undo, subvert the fake news.
Should only happen.
Yeah. Any further thoughts or associations?
It should only happen.
Inshallah, as we say, right? Thank you. Absolutely. So, Eileen, you want to read the last section, 13 to 16?
The sluggard says, "There's a lion in the street. I shall be killed if I step outside." The mouth of a forbidden woman is a deep pit. He who is doomed by God falls into it. If folly settles in the heart of a youth, the rod of discipline will remove it. To profit by withholding what is due to the poor is like making gifts to the rich. Pure loss.
Well, excluding the first two lines, which we'll get to in a second, it feels like much of this is kind of summing up what came beforehand in this section. There's a lot of connections. Again, the editing of this section is a riddle to I think almost most commentators. How one section, one two-liner came after another two-liner. But here too, we've got a theme that is approached many times about the forbidden woman. The difference here is that it's the ones who are doomed by God. In other words, once you've started this process of misbehaving, well, God will make sure that you find yourself alone with this woman and making out, which is this forbidden woman, which is going to lead you down to ruin. Three dots, right? If the other thing is, and we didn't have that in this section, we've had it before many times, the sexual promiscuity, the warning against promiscuity. And now it has, if going back to the Alpi Chanoch Lenar Alpi Darko, so if folly settles in the heart of the youth, so even the way to discipline that is with the rod again. And then again, this relationship between the poor and the wealthy. But this thing about, there's a lion in the street. Like, what's going on? What is this about? This is different than the others. And I think in the simple meaning is that, and this is how our friend, whose name I forgot, Michael Fox, that's how he sees it, is that this is the person who is lazy and is told to do something for their own benefit, they just come up with the wildest excuses. And so the author of this particular doublet or couplet came up and says, well, I can't go outside. There's a lion outside. What are the chances there being a lion? There are lions in ancient Israel. I'm not sure if they still existed in the time of the rabbis. But let's see what happens in Midrash Dvarim Rabbah. This too is a homiletical midrash. All the rabbis are from different times. they're they're mostly from Eretz Yisrael, from the land of Israel. But and Midrash Rabbah has different versions of it as well. So yeah. And some would say, I think people still say this is part of the Tanhuma tradition. In any case, what do we have here, Eileen?
In your mouth and in your heart to perform it. The rabbi said, Solomon said 7 manners regarding the idler, but what Moses said was greater than all of them. How so? They said to the idler, Your teacher is in the city. Go and learn Torah from him. He answers them and says to them, I am afraid of the lion on the way. From where is it derived? It is as it is stated. The idler says, There is a lion on the way. They said to him, Your teacher is in the neighborhood. Get up and go to him. He says to them, I am afraid that there might be a lion outside, as it is stated. A lion in the streets? They said to him, He is residing next to your house. He said to them, But the lion is outside, as it is stated. The idler says, There is a lion in the street. They said to him, Inside the house. He said to them, But if I go and find the door of his room locked, I will need to come back. They said to him, It is open. From where is it derived? It is as it is stated. The door turns on its hinges, and the idler is on his bed. Ultimately, he did not know what to answer. He said to them, Whether the door is open or locked, I wish to sleep a bit longer. From where is it derived? It is as it is stated. How long will you lie down, idler? When will you rise up from your sleep? He is awakened from his sleep in the morning. They placed before him to eat. He was too lazy to put it in his mouth. From where is it derived? It is as it is stated. The idler inserts his hand into the dish. He is too weary to return it to his mouth.
Okay, so a bit tedious, kind of overstates the point of somebody who's lazy and has excuses. I think we all recognize that characteristic, but does bring in our verse as part of this very long section that compares the advice that Moses has towards the people and the advice that Solomon, who is the book of Proverbs is attributed to in rabbinic literature. Of course, I cut this short to get it on the page, but just wanted to see that this idea of using the lion as an excuse, far-fetched as it is part of is an example of all the things and excuses that people, meaning us, we come up with not to do something which is the right thing, not to do something which is the difficult thing, when we're tired, when we're depressed. So I think my parting words for today would be, in this period of time where, although we are overjoyed that 20 hostages came home and they're with their families, we're extremely anxious about the rest of the remains that we don't know if all of them or how many of them will ever be returned. But the situation in the state of Israel is dire with the political leadership situation in this country and it's overwhelming. It's absolutely overwhelming. And so let us not say to ourselves that the lion is outside. Let's, yeah. Anything else, folks? So if you would indulge me as I say Kaddish for my mother. I'm going to say Kaddish for Avanan. I can get a prayer book here someplace. You're right there.
Where is he? I brought him. I think they're here, right here.
Gadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'amad yivrach chirutei ve'amlich malchutei. V'chayichon u'v'yomichon u'chayei l'chol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'bizman kariv imru amen.
Amen.
Eshmei Rabban Mevarach Le'alam Le'almei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal. Shmei Dekuchav B'yichu. Leila min kol v'chata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata. Tamiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Al Yisrael ve'al Rabbanan ve'al Tamidehon ve'al kol Tamidei Talmidehon. Ve'al kol man daskim be'oraita. V'di v'atra kadisha aden. V'di b'chol atar v'atar. Yehei lahon elachon shlama rabba china v'chizda rachamei v'chayei rechei v'mezonei revichei u'farkana min kodam avon di b'shmaya v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim tovim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol bai olam v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. Thank you all for being here. Thank you especially for allowing me to say Kaddish. And I think we'll be back on track now. I hope to be a little bit more prepared. I'm interested, Diane, you seem to have a good command of the language. I will look and try to understand the relationship between those two Ayin Resh Mem roots. At least two the BDB has. It could be that newer dictionaries know more about the language because of what's been learned in the last century, more or less, since those dictionaries were composed. We have more, there's more knowledge of Semitic languages, and perhaps that's where we'll find the connection between nakedness on one hand and cleverness or piling something up on the other hand. Okay, everybody.
good.
And thank you, Madalena,
you.
for helping
Thank
us
you.
out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shalom.